So when the bank robbers ran into the bank at the start of the episode, there was one cutaway to a person saying, "Oh man, AT&T sucks," when the lights went out. And I'm just like, wow, AT&T out here catching strays this episode. Hello, interwebs. I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review the 2 brand new episodes of Daredevil Born Again that we got this week. It's surprising that they're releasing 2 this week. Doesn't seem to be a particular rhyme or reason for it. More probably just Disney trying to burn off all of Daredevil Born Again before Star Wars Andor starts next month. And it's 3 episode a week release schedule that's going to make my life a living hell trying to review all that in a timely manner. But we'll get there when we get there. But regardless, we do have 2 episodes this week that I am going to talk about right now. So just an interesting little thing here that I'm going to be doing for this review. I've actually not, as of right now, seen the second of the 2 episodes. So I am going to be reviewing both in this video, but I've only seen with interest because I want to kind of talk about each episode on their own, and then I'll sort of talk about my thoughts about both towards the end of this once I've seen both of them. But for right now, let's just talk about with interest the one that I've seen so far. And actually, it really kind of helped for me to watch this on its own because having seen this standalone, I am starting to now get better on this show's wavelength. I don't think I particularly like what it's doing, but I like what it's trying to do, which is trying to be that episode of the week format. If you all recall my review last week, I actually got a lot of flack in the comments last week for saying I didn't know where the show was going, and I felt it was big on thematics and not a lot on, carrying along the season's storyline. And I think that all that criticism to me still applies to last week's episode for a reason that I'll get to in a second. But now I kind of understand more what this show's trying to do now that we are at episode 5 of this show, because I was still kind of reading this show to a degree like it was trying to be the Netflix show, which was telling one long movie essentially in a 13-episode period, which is kind of what most of the MCU shows on Disney Plus have been as well, with like this exception of maybe WandaVision or She-Hulk would be like the kind of 2 that would break the mold there. And this show is actually trying to do that same thing too, I think. And you can really tell with episode 3, with the trial episode that we got, and then this episode where we get essentially a bank heist episode that Daredevil gets involved in. And yes, there's a little bit of scooching the plot forward a little bit because the bank robbers tie into the overarching plot with Kingpin and his wife and all of that jazz going on, considering, it has to do with that $1.8 million Vanessa gave to try and smooth over the situation. So there is some tying into that a little bit here. Also, everyone was very clear about the $1.8 million, like being very specific on the amount of money. But yeah, like it is inching that forward, but we are just getting a solo plot just focused on Matt dealing with a bank robbery. And I really kind of enjoy that as a concept. I really like, okay, Daredevil's just doing, a one-off story like you would get in the comic books. You'd get an issue and it'd be a one-off story for the most part. And then you'd get like the overarching plot moving forward a little bit. However, I think where it's falling for me on that is that these plots ultimately feel like I've seen them before and it's not adding all that much new to the formula. There are a couple things here that I do like. Specifically, I think adding Yusuf Khan here, Kamala Khan's father, was wonderful. He is always a joy to see. He and the rest of the Khan family was like the best part of the Marvels and Miss Marvel. Kamala was also fantastic. Loved her, and she was the best part of the Marvels as well. But like just her whole family unit is just wonderful. And it was great to see him here, and he bounces off of Matt really, really well. I do think the show hammers home a little bit too much. Like, yes, he is Kamala's father. Like, there's just lines that feel a little bit clunky. Like when he is like opening up the vault with Matt, and he says like, "Oh, this is like the one, like give me a piggy bank to my daughter to teach her the value of money," or whatever it was, whatever that line is. But it's like a little clunky to just get a call out to Miss Marvel, and it just does that a few too many times for my liking, where I'm like, we get it, he's Miss Marvel's dad, I got it. So like the show's up being a little bit clunky on that front, but overall he was an enjoyable presence that added a little bit of fun personality to the episode that I just really, really enjoyed. Even if the writing wasn't really up to par with him, like he was bringing that energy, and he bounced off of Matt in a fun kind of way that I really liked. Weirdly enough, Matt is just a character, and I think this matches up with the comics too, but Matt is just a weird character that just kind of vibes with whoever. He's done stuff with She-Hulk, Spider-Man, now Ms. Marvel. It seems like there's going to be more of, maybe even in next episode. So I enjoy that vibe a lot for Matt, and I like that, getting that crossover energy spirit here. However, the rest of the episode, though, just felt kind of bog standard. Like, we have, like, Devlin, the lead guy, the Irish dude who sort of was leading the bank robbers. He was fun enough. Same with the negotiator. She was fun enough, and I believe she's the, like, thin blue line lady from way back in the first episode of the season. So, like, they're fun enough, but they don't really break the mold. And then there's a couple just, like, detail things that I'm just like, why are we doing this? Like, for example, when the cops decide to just burst into the bank, it's just that, like, tropey beat of, like, well, the negotiator says we should wait to try and save the hostages, but we're the cops, so we're gonna go in. And, like, there's no, like, it fits the kind of the ideas that the shows have been playing with, like, the cops are a corrupt system or whatever, but it doesn't, like, the show never makes that explicit or clear. It's just kind of tropey and just instantly goes for it. And I'm like, all right, this is just rote, and I don't care, and it just feels like it's just doing it because it's part of the plot of these types of things. I mean, like, there's no real reason or escalation happening for the cop to decide to burst into the bank at that point. It just happens. And again, it just feels like it's happening because the plot needs it to happen, number one, and number two, that's just a beat that we tend to see in these type of bank robbery storylines, but it just feels perfunctory here. And then there's also, like, small detail stuff that I bugged me too. Like, for example, when Khan says that he needs to find, like, a number 4 to put the key in, we get a cutaway shot at one point, and it's like a number 300. It's like 383. Doesn't even have a 4 in it at all. Why that cutaway? It's just a lack of attention to detail on a cutaway like that just makes me question Khan. And I'm like, I'm sure it was just some, quick little shot that they used, but why would the editor use that? And why wouldn't, even if they did use it, this is me being a filmmaker, like, just, it takes 2 seconds to do a little VFX to, like, fix the number if that was the problem. So, like, it was just weird little detail stuff like that. Like, even in some of the dialogue, like, for example, when Matt goes back and finds the key on the guy who was trying to open the bank and gives it to Khan to open everything, and Matt's line is, I guess it's our lucky day. And I'm like, why is it your lucky day, though? Like, it makes sense that he would have it on. That's not really luck. That just makes sense. It's just a weird line for Matt to say. So, like, just little detail stuff like that that's kind of like tropey Marvel-style writing that doesn't, like, have any nuance to it or characterization. It's just sort of like, I guess this is the thing they say at this point, that it just doesn't make it land. And so, as a result, the whole bank robbery just kind of falls flat. There are a couple other bright spots, like the fight sequence in the stairwell was really cool. Matt having to grab the gun before it fell to not make noise. Really, really cool. Enjoyed that. But then ultimately, we get to the end of the episode, and it kind of goes into a larger arc of the series where, Matt has to beat up this guy, and he gets on the red thing, the mask, which is kind of cute, to allude to, he's becoming more like Daredevil. But the show never really minds that for pathos. Like, back in episode, I think it was 2 of this season, Matt beats up those cops, and then he screams at the end, and we get that visceral yell of, like, ooh, the darkness is coming out of him. That kind of at least tied into this idea of Matt struggling with, do I be the Daredevil or not? Whereas in this episode, he just kind of goes and beats up the guy, even puts on a mask reminiscent of the Daredevil, but yet he still doesn't, there's no interesting pathos mind from that character beat for him. So it's like you're moving the plot forward, I guess, a little bit in terms of, like, when is Matt going to be the Daredevil again? But there's no tension to it, no character development to it. And so it doesn't just land all that strong. So I think ultimately where I land on this episode, and again, I'm going to be reviewing episode 2 in just a second, is just, I get what the show is doing. It is trying to be an episode of the week style format, but it is not really doing anything unique or interesting with that format overall, other than just a few little fun little beats that tie into Marvel stuff, like with Khan. And so I don't, it's just not working for me, even though I really like the concept. And to go back really briefly before I jump into episode 2 to last week's episode, I think my problem with last week's episode kind of falls on a different front, whereas last week's episode felt like it was trying to do a case of the week thing with the guy that Matt had to defend from the caramel corn stuff, but it was just felt like it was there to just be a point of thematic. Yeah, the system really is bad, Matt. I robbed get the caramel corn because I just wanted something for me, and I'm just going to be put back in the system over and over again. It's like, that's an interesting point, but it's not an interesting case. It's not an interesting story. It's just there for, a thematic beat that I don't disagree with. It kind of feels like the show coming in like, hey, kid, come in, take a knee. Let me take a moment with you here. Let's just chat this out, all right? This is a big moment where I want you to know, and it's just not making the storytelling interesting. My thing here is, like, the message is not bad, and I like the ideas that you're playing with here, but you can weave it more naturally into the storytelling in a less overt kind of way. And I'm even someone, I watch Star Trek. I'm here for the big speeches, but you also have to have some plot. Like, I don't mind being even lectured to. I sometimes enjoy that as a thing, but you have to have some plot that allows us to like get really invested, and the show's not really hitting that for me. And I think both last week's episode and this week's first episode really are showing that to me, that they're trying to do it with style of the week thing, but not really either pushing the plot forward all that much in an interesting way or giving me like an interesting plot in and of itself in the episode in an interesting way. And since it's not doing either of those things, I'm just sort of left being here like, you're not wrong. Don't hate this conceptually, but just not coming out in the details. Just not coming out in the details, even though on paper, I love all of this. Alrighty, time to talk about the second episode, Excessive Force. And it is really interesting that I decided to watch these two episodes separately, because a lot of my criticisms I had about the first episode are not at all in this second one. I think a large part of that reason is that this episode is not doing the episode of the week style format, which as I said before, like on paper as a concept, but the show hasn't been really pulling off too well in terms of weaving it into a larger sort of character arc for these folks, or being interesting on its own sort of individual level. This episode instead is actually finally dealing with the long-running seasons arc of Kingpin coming to terms with being the Kingpin, Matt coming to terms with being the Daredevil, and actually dealing with Muse. Like, now that we're actually digging into these plot elements that the show clearly wants to explore much more, it gets so much more interesting. I just wish it could pull that off in a more episodic format, because I do like episodic formats. But that being said, this episode, when it actually is doing the things that it's been wanting to do for so long, really works. Let's start on the Kingpin. I really enjoyed so much of what was going on with him being confronted by the gangster guy that was having his crew steal the diamond last episode, and Kingpin sort of being drawn back into that life, even demanding money for himself. And again, just the Kingpin coming out there. And I love that he gets that confrontation with the elites of the city, right? Because the elites sort of represent the political establishment, the status quo. Yeah, we want to keep the system running because we're at the top and we have the power. Whereas Kingpin kind of, again, it's not one for one, but it is sort of like that sort of Trumpian, like, strongman, energy of like, I hate that I can't do what I just want to do and don't have the power to do what I want to do, so I'll just take it and do whatever I want and destroy anything in my way to get it. That sort of very fascist strongman mentality. Obviously, with stuff going on in the news today, which we won't get into, it's very clear that the Kingpin is more competent than the Trump administration, which, is not surprising. Fascists are usually little insecure bullies who are pretending at being competent. But regardless, Kingpin is unrealistic in that regard, but he still fits that mindset. And so, I agree that these status quo sort of elitist folks are a problem, but his way of going about it is really bad as well, because he gets all the bad apple cops and he sort of sets them loose on the city to take down Muse. There's a danger here. I like the idea of like he's using cops, people who are part of the system, to then just go out and say like, hey, use whatever force that you're willing to use to do whatever. The only element of it that I don't like is that we show that the police chief is kind of against it to a degree. I wish, it's kind of the show doing what I was worried it was going to do, which is saying like, oh, well, the problem cops are just a few bad apples, and, it doesn't spoil the bunch because we're going to ignore the rest of that phrase, and it's not going to sort of systemically look at cops. Again, that's sort of Marvel's MO. It's not really looking at systemic stuff. I had hope, but I didn't expect any differently. But yeah, it is still going with that idea, which I, still enjoy to a degree. I think it's still pointing at the fact that there is a large problem with how cops are able to do this within the system. And so at least there is that part of this being addressed. And so I like that Kingpin is using that to his advantage to try and just take control of the city and go after, and using Muse as sort of a way to do that. And I think that that's really, really smart. I really like Muse too as an interesting villain, because he's not really something they can physically stand up to Daredevil, as we see in the final fight of the episode, but he's an ideological one of like, he just represents the cities, like he puts up all these symbols and he's sort of viewed as a problem in the city, but he also has this artistic sort of pushback we get at the start of the episode of like how graffiti artists are seen as the real problem when like the cops are out here doing also just as bad things. I like that there's some interesting tie-in with his character, even though he hasn't spoken yet, to some of the larger questions of the show. And I really, really like Matt's stuff in this episode, because remember when I said just a few minutes ago for you guys for the first episode that we didn't draw any pathos for Matt becoming the Daredevil in last week's episode, and I still hold by that. Like, if we're going to look at that episode as an episode on its own, I wish they had made that that connection. But in this episode, we do get the connections to all the stuff right at the beginning when Matt doing the prayer at the beginning of the episode. So like at least it ties it all together, even if it didn't necessarily draw that pathos in a really interesting way within its own episodic structure. It is at least tying it together here and really pulling out that stuff with like Matt. Does he choose to be the Daredevil? Does he want to be that? And it's brought together with Angela, Hector Ayala's daughter, who goes looking for Muse and sort of calls out Matt. I will say the writing on Angela is a little bit clunky. It feels like the writing of an adult writing a teenager rather than what things that an actual teenager would say to Matt. It feels a little bit too I'm a teen and I'm angsty and how dare you, Matt, not listen to me. Like it comes a little bit across too much like that. It gets the job done, but her dialogue was just a little wonky to me. It's like it's not wrong in terms of what it's trying to do with her character. Like that's a perspective that she would have. Just some of the moment-to-moment dialogue thing was a bit too verbose, I guess, is part of it. And I ultimately like where it leads Matt, where he like hears about all of this stuff about Muse going on. He's like, all right, I guess I got to go back and be a vigilante because the cops aren't going to be the ones to handle it properly, and they're going to crack down on the rest of the city in order to do so. So he goes out and just does it himself, and he beats the shit out of Muse and rescues Angela. Like, I actually thought that's that moment where, you know, Muse is like looking out in the tunnel and Daredevil comes running and like shoots his thing at Muse and like goes in to punch him, like this grappling hook. Like, oh, that was very, very cool. So like some really good moments here on that front. And so all of this built very beautifully and very wonderfully to a really good climax that feels like it's finally building up the rest of the show. And bring it back to Kingpin with his prisoner, that, you know, the guy who also slept with Vanessa. Again, it kind of speaks again to that fascist strongman mentality. It's like, I can't really forgive, but I can let you, we can fight it out like men sort of thing, instead of having a forgiving mindset and able to like let things go and let things heal. No, he just wants to beat it out with violence, because that's how fascists think, me versus them. I can't share anything. I can't share a woman, for God's sake. Woman can't have an agency of her own sake, so I'll just beat up another dude. Again, just a good articulation there of that. So just like this episode really, really worked for me. Was it the best thing in the world? No, but this is what when the show is firing on all cylinders, this is what it should be giving me. I just wish it could replicate what this is doing with its clear overall structural intent of the season and the interesting character evolution, and give that to me in better microcosm with its episode of the week format. So I'm curious to see where we're going to go from here, if we're going to get more episode of the week. So if we're going to be fully focusing in on Kingpin and Daredevil coming to a head, with the cops sort of being sort of the ideological battleground that they face off against. I think that that's a really interesting idea. I hope that where this goes, clearly that's where the show's interest lies. And I guess I just said it a few times already, but I just wish it had been able to better capture that with the story of the week format, because I think Marvel needs more of those, but just wasn't hitting it on episode 1 for me. But episode 2 definitely worked. What did you think of these 2 episodes? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. But beyond all of that, my friends, I hope you live long and prosper.